and this is 𝗀𝗙cie𝗪𝗏. And we've been in our Christmas series, haven't we, looking at who Jesus is and what's so important about this baby at this time of year. Why don't you come and join us as we see how Jesus is our priest?
Flora Fields likes plants and flowers. In her garden she spends her hours with her little friend Winston, the one who helps the plants grow when he wriggles and squirms. So come and plant a seed, see what it yields. Let's go into the garden with Flora Fields.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us. Over the past few weeks, we've seen that Jesus shows us who God is. He shows us how we can be friends with God. And he also shows us how to live because he rescued us. Well, this week, we're going to see how Jesus is our priest. So why don't we hand over and find out what it means for him to be our priest?
Oh, hi Flora, thank you. I hope you are well. Hi kids. I hope you guys are keeping extremely well. Now, my name is Tunde, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm one of the helpers at the kids' church. Now, today we're going to continue in the series that we've been looking at over the past 3 weeks. And that series, of course, is titled Beyond the Manger. In that series, we've been trying to understand who Jesus is. In the first week, we looked at Jesus, our God. We were told how God the Son became man. He became flesh. And he walked on earth. People were able to see him. They were able to touch him. They were able to hear him. And we could relate to that because he became man. But the question is, why did he become man? And then in week 2, we learned that Jesus Christ became man so that we can become closer to God, because we were far, far away from God. Despite our best efforts, we were so far away from God, it was unimaginable. And what Jesus had to do was to come and die on the cross, and with his death on the cross, he was able to build a bridge between us and God, where we've got access to God. We have a relationship with God. We became at peace with God. Therefore, Jesus became our peacemaker. But then, what would make God the man become flesh, become man? I mean, God the Son, what will make God the Son become flesh? And we came to understand that Jesus Christ demonstrated what we call humility. He humbled himself. Can you imagine? God the Son, the one who created heaven and earth, became a lowly man. And he died on the cross. And remember, death on the cross is not a desirable sort of death at all. It was a very shameful sort of death. Now imagine that God, who created heaven and earth, became man to die. I mean, he could have died some other sort of deaths, but no, he died the most shameful of all deaths in those days. And that was because of the humility that he had. Jesus Christ thought not of himself, but he thought about us, about giving us that access to God. And we know that Jesus, through that action, became our very example, the model that we as Christians, we need to follow. In other words, we also need to be humble. We need to think about others and not just think about ourselves. So Jesus became our example. And then today we're going to be looking at Jesus Christ, our high priest. Jesus Christ, our high priest. Now, what does that mean? And that's what we're going to be exploring today. So today's passage, all right, is based on Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 to 16, and also Hebrews chapter 5, verse 1 to 4. Can I please ask that you pause the video right now, read through those verses, and then come back, and then we'll talk about it further. Thank you for coming back. I was afraid you wouldn't come back, but thanks for coming and sticking with it. Right. So, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 to 16. Now, I love this passage because it tells me who Jesus really is and what his role is as being the high priest. What does that mean to us? Now, this is what I like to do. I like to read Hebrews 5, 1 to 4 first, and then I'll come back to Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 to 16. And the reason why I would like to do it that way is because Hebrews 5, 1 to 4 tells us who the high priest is, what the role of a high priest is, who selects a high priest. And then Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 to 16 talks specifically about Jesus Christ being the most awesome high priest ever. All right, so Hebrews chapter 5, 1 to 4. Now, what that passage really is trying to show us is that a high priest is a person who is selected by God. They are not self-selected. You can't just come and say, oh, I want to be a high priest and that's what I'm going to do. All right? It is God who actually selects, because God looks at the person and says, you will be fit to be a high priest. So it's a calling from God, not one that you choose yourself. So a high priest is somebody who is chosen by God. And what is his responsibility? His responsibility is to bridge the gap between us and God. And how does the high priest do that? He does that by offering gifts and offering sacrifices for our sins to God. And this was a very important role, because without it, then God's anger will be brought upon us, and we don't want to be under God's anger. And that is why the high priest was always there, making sacrifices, making atonements for our sins. So whenever we did anything wrong, we go to the high priest and say, I've done something wrong, can you please intercede on my behalf, all right, to God? And then they go and then do all the rituals, all right, and they make the necessary sacrifices, and they say, yes, you can go now, your sin has been forgiven. But that became too constant, because remember, we as man, we are prone to sin. All right, we sin all the time despite our best efforts not to. And therefore God felt it was important for us to have that high priest who is going to atone for all our sins all at once. And that was why God sent Jesus Christ to come and die for us. He became the sacrifice, and at the same time he became the high priest, the one who goes to God and says, God, you have to forgive him, or you have to forgive her. And you know what makes Jesus Christ special? And that was why in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 to 16, I love that verse very much, because it tells us how compassionate Jesus Christ is. And Jesus Christ being compassionate, what that means basically is because he became man, so that he knows every single thing that we feel, because he had felt it. He knows the emotions that we're going through, because he has been through that also. He can understand. He can relate. All the temptations that we face, he was tempted also, so he can understand. Once I took my son to 𝗀𝗂𝗯𝗀𝗀. I don't know if you know 𝗀𝗂𝗯𝗀𝗀. It's got lots of rides, and you know, you can go anywhere you want really, and you'll have lots of fun. But I'm somebody who's I'm afraid of heights. I don't do well with heights, and there's this particular ride where well, it is very steep and very, very high. And my son wanted to ride. He wanted to go on that. And I thought, no, we're not doing that. But of course, he insisted. And I said, okay, I'll take you up the stairs. When we get to the top, you can go on the slide down, all right? And then I'll come back down the stairs. Now, going up the stairs was also very difficult for me, but because my son wanted to go on it, I thought, no worries, I'll face my fears. And we did go up the stairs, and he went down the slide, you know, very happy. And I thought, good, my job is done here. Now I need to turn back and go down the stairs. And I turned back, and what did I see? A huge line, a very long line of people going all the way from the top of the stairs down, and you know, it was a very narrow staircase, so I couldn't go back down the staircase. So the only way down was to go down through the slide. My goodness, I just closed my eyes, and before I knew it, I was down. Now, if you asked me what happened between when I was at the top and when I got down, I really don't know. It's all a blur to me, because I think I passed out. My family told me that I was screaming all the way down, but I don't know if I'm going to believe them on that. But my point is, I tried to be a father to my son and, you know, help him to go on a ride that he desperately wanted to. But unlike myself, Jesus has been through that ride before. He knows what you're going to feel going down that ride. He will not be afraid, and he will hold your hand, right, all the way from the top to the bottom. And that is what Jesus Christ, how perfect he is as our high priest, because he has felt, he knows what we're going through, because he's gone through that. But he was without sin. We, of course, continue to sin, but he was without sin. And that's what makes Jesus Christ the perfect high priest, because he had gone through all of that, but yet he did not commit one sin. And that is why Hebrews chapter 4 verse 16 then says, now let us come boldly to him. Let us come with all confidence to Jesus, because we know that he has been through that, and he will be able to intercede for us in the presence of God, so that we can find grace for help in the times of our need. So can I just encourage you guys that whenever you're going through anything, all right, always know that you can always count on Jesus. You can always count on the perfect and the most awesome high priest ever, because he's been there, and he'll take you through it, and he'll intercede on your behalf, and you'll tell God, God, forgive this person, because I know what he's going through. And we can always count on Jesus for that. And don't forget, guys, Jesus is our God. He is our peacemaker. He is our example. So we need to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And we need to be humble and care for others, just as Jesus Christ cares for us. I hope you continue to think about these things, and I pray that God will help us to understand them more and more each passing day. I'll leave you with that thought, and until next time, please look after yourselves. Bye.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Isn't it great that Jesus is our priest? He came And he was a man, and he completely understood and went through lots of struggles. It means that we can turn to him in prayer, and he knows exactly what it's like, what we're going through. Isn't that great? Well, there's songs in the links below if you'd like to click into them, and there's also crafts you can do as well. So we hope you have a lovely time, and next week is our great nativity. So why don't you click in next week and come and join us for that? It should be a great time. And Merry Christmas. Bye.